The University of Fort Hare, once a beacon of hope and liberation, stands as one of South Africa's most storied institutions. Founded in 1916, it has long been a symbol of academic excellence and a cradle for the country's future leaders. Its halls have echoed with the footsteps of visionaries, activists, and scholars who shaped the nation's destiny. For generations, Fort Hare represented the promise of education as a tool for empowerment and social change, especially during the dark days of apartheid. But today, that proud legacy is under threat. The university now finds itself engulfed in scandal, its reputation clouded by controversy and uncertainty. Students and staff walk the campus with a sense of unease as the institution faces some of the most serious allegations in its history. Once the alma mater of Nelson Mandela and Oliver Tambo, Fort Hare's legacy is now threatened by a wave of allegations, ranging from the sale of fake degrees to deep-rooted political interference and even violence on campus. The very institution that once nurtured the minds of South Africa's greatest leaders is now at the center of a storm, its future hanging in the balance. The Special Investigating Unit, or SIU, has launched a sweeping probe into the university's affairs. Their investigation has uncovered shocking claims: academic credentials allegedly for sale, staff members living in fear, and a culture of intimidation that has taken root. The SIU's work is painstaking, involving the examination of confidential documents, interviews with whistleblowers, and the piecing together of a complex web of corruption. The scandal has reached the highest levels of power. Powerful politicians are now implicated, and the investigation has become a national crisis, shaking public trust in South Africa's institutions. Headlines across the country ask tough questions about accountability, transparency, and the future of higher education. The story is no longer just about academic fraud, it's about the abuse of power, the erosion of public trust, and the fight for integrity in a system meant to uplift society. As the SIU digs deeper, the nation waits anxiously. Journalists, investigators, and ordinary citizens are all watching closely, hoping that the truth will come to light and that those responsible will be held to account. The crisis at Fort Hare had reached a boiling point, demanding urgent intervention from the highest office in the land. What began as whispers of academic dishonesty and administrative misconduct soon erupted into a full-blown scandal that threatened to undermine the very foundation of one of South Africa's most historic universities. President Cyril Ramaphosa, recognizing the gravity of the situation, took decisive action. He signed a special proclamation, empowering the Special Investigating Unit, or SIU, with sweeping authority to root out corruption, fraud, and maladministration at Fort Hare. This was not just a routine investigation. Ramaphosa's directive gave the SIU unprecedented powers to follow the evidence wherever it might lead. The SIU's initial mandate was narrow, focusing on a single department suspected of irregularities. But as investigators began their work, the scale of the problem quickly became apparent. The probe expanded rapidly, soon encompassing every degree program and all university campuses, as new leads and allegations surfaced almost daily. The SIU was tasked with uncovering a web of collusion, bribery, and the dishonest awarding of degrees, especially those granted to influential government officials and public servants. Investigators pored over thousands of academic records, financial documents, and internal communications, searching for evidence of wrongdoing that had been hidden for years. News of the investigation spread quickly, dominating headlines and sparking heated debate across the country. What had started as a local scandal at Fort Hare was now a national reckoning, raising uncomfortable questions about the integrity of South Africa's entire higher education system. The message from the presidency was unmistakable. No one, regardless of their position or connections, would be shielded from scrutiny. The rule of law would prevail, and justice would be served. Across South Africa, citizens, students, and faculty watched anxiously as the investigation unfolded. The fate of Fort Hare and the credibility of South Africa's education system now hung in the balance. The SIU's investigation quickly grew in scope, drawing in some of the Eastern Cape's most influential and recognizable political figures. What began as a probe into academic irregularities at the University of Fort Hare soon spiraled into a full-blown political storm, with the public watching closely as the list of implicated names grew longer and more prominent. Among those thrust into the spotlight was Premier Oscar Mabuyan. He faced serious allegations of having fraudulently gained admission to a master's program, and his PhD proposal came under intense scrutiny. The accusations cast a shadow over his academic achievements and raised uncomfortable questions about the intersection of politics and higher education. Rather than cooperating with investigators, Mabuyane mounted a vigorous legal defense. He took the matter to court, seeking to halt the SIU's investigation and challenging the legitimacy of the probe itself.
I can confirm that a student by the name of Oscar Mabuyane, who is the current premier of the Eastern Cape, he threatened the university by taking us to court.
His legal maneuvering became a focal point in the unfolding drama, with many wondering what he might be trying to hide. The University of Fort Hare, however, refused to back down. University officials made it clear they would not be intimidated by political pressure or legal threats.
The investigation basically confirmed that he entered South Africa from Nigeria with false qualifications, and he also made use of some overseas universities that was never in existence.
They publicly committed to upholding the integrity of their institution, vowing to fight Mabuyane's legal challenge and support the investigation wherever it led. The Democratic Alliance, South Africa's main opposition party, seized the moment to demand full transparency. They called for all findings to be made public and for those responsible to be held accountable, further fueling the political drama and putting additional pressure on both the university and the government. The scandal's reach extended even further when National Minister Noxolo Kiviet was also implicated. Her involvement sent shockwaves through the national government, raising urgent questions about the integrity and ethical standards of South Africa's leadership at the highest levels. As more details emerged, a troubling pattern became clear. Multiple officials were alleged to have received degrees without fulfilling the necessary academic requirements. This suggested that the problem was not isolated but rather indicative of a deeper systemic issue within the university and beyond. The scandal was no longer just about a handful of individuals. It exposed a culture where political influence and personal connections could override merit, undermining the very foundations of academic integrity and public trust. For students, faculty, and ordinary citizens, the revelations were deeply unsettling. Confidence in both the education system and government institutions was shaken to its core, sparking protests and calls for reform across the country. The Fort Hare scandal had erupted into a full-scale national political crisis, dominating headlines and forcing the country to confront uncomfortable truths about corruption, privilege, and the urgent need for accountability. The investigation at Fort Hare turned deadly, revealing the true stakes. Key officials working with the SIU survived assassination attempts, others were not so lucky. Murders rocked the campus, targeting those fighting corruption. Fear gripped the university, making witnesses reluctant to come forward.
What's the price tag on your head?
At the time, I think they said they want me for 600,000.
The first one you saw?
Yeah, the first one. I'm sure it is increased by now, and I'm going nowhere. That's that.
Police formed a special task team, leading to high-profile arrests. Even the police minister attended court, underscoring the gravity of the crimes. The violence exposed a criminal syndicate willing to kill to protect its interests. This was no longer just academic fraud, it was organized crime. The pursuit of truth had become a matter of life and death. The SIU uncovered a vast, organized scheme selling academic qualifications. Postgraduate degrees were awarded to unqualified individuals, many of them government officials. Syndicates managed everything, from admissions to falsified transcripts, often in exchange for bribes. The breakdown of academic controls allowed corruption to flourish. The scale was staggering. Countless degrees were rendered worthless. The focus was on postgraduate programs where fraudulent credentials led to promotions and pay raises. The scandal cast doubt on the value of all Fort Hare degrees. The findings forced a national reckoning with corruption in public institutions. South Africa was forced to confront the true cost of compromised education. Fort Hare's leadership, under Vice-Chancellor Professor Sakela Bulungu, chose to confront the crisis head-on. The university cooperated with the SIU and revoked 36 fraudulent degrees, a bold, unprecedented move. When Premier Mabuyane tried to block the probe, Fort Hare's legal team stood firm. The university insisted the investigation was essential to restore its reputation. Internal and external reforms were launched to prevent future scandals. Fort Hare was fighting not just for its past, but for its future. The Fort Hare scandal sent shockwaves through South Africa's higher education sector. Employers and institutions now questioned the legitimacy of academic credentials nationwide. Public trust was shattered, fueling resentment and cynicism. The scandal exposed the risk of unqualified officials in senior government roles. It raised alarms about the competence and integrity of the state. Calls grew for a complete overhaul of how public officials are vetted. The saga became a symbol of the country's broader struggle with corruption. The response would determine whether trust could ever be restored. The scandal became a political battleground. The Democratic Alliance demanded Premier Mabuyane step aside, framing the crisis as a failure of ANC leadership. Civil society and opposition parties called for parliamentary inquiries and stricter oversight. The ANC's response was seen as a test of its commitment to reform. Public outrage grew over how compromised leaders could rise to power. Demands for lifestyle audits and background checks intensified. The scandal forced a national debate on the standards expected of public officials. The fight for accountability was now front and center in South African politics. The Fort Hare saga is far from over. Legal battles continue, with court cases against those accused of violence and fraud. The outcome of Premier Mabuyane's legal challenge will set a precedent for future investigations. The SIU is now focused on building prosecutable cases and delivering justice. Fort Hare faces a long road to recovery, with more degrees likely to be revoked and sweeping reforms needed. The university's leadership must rebuild trust through transparency and accountability. The scandal has exposed deep flaws in South Africa's governance and education systems. The nation's response will signal whether real change is possible. Will this crisis lead to reform or reinforce a culture of impunity? The journey ahead will define South Africa's fight against corruption. That's all for this episode. Let us know your thoughts on this saga in the comments. Would love to hear your views as always. Be safe, stay blessed, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.